Hello and welcome to AngularFire. On this week's episode, we have panelist Justin Schwartzberger,
Hey, how's it going?
and we have a special guest today, David East.
What's up, everybody?
So, David, you came on today to talk to us a little bit about your favorite subject, I know, Firebase.
Yes, today I'm going to be showing off a lot of the stuff with the AngularFire 2 library, and I hope you like observables because that's if you don't, it's going to be a long show.
So, we're going to do things a little bit different today. Instead of the usual interview style, we're going to have David actually give us a couple demos. So he's going to give us kind of an intro demo, just getting up to speed with AngularFire 2, and then we'll get into observables, and then finally the new router. So actually, I know that the router's changed over a couple of times. It'll be fun to see David work through, I'm sure, the numerous issues that will occur, but let's cross our fingers and see what happens.
Yeah, I've literally used the new router. I love the new router. I've used it a couple times, and I got the demo I'm doing today working this morning. But outside, that was at like 5:30 in the morning, and I was like, "This is good. I'm done. I don't need to practice anymore." And we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
All right, David. So let's start off with the first one. If you want to share your screen and show us
Yes.
kind of the intro to AngularFire 2.
Let's see here. Make sure I got my setup correct. All right. I'm gonna do this from scratch. So I'm gonna MK a new deer and call it Air 4 because that will be my. Actually, no, I don't want to do that. Let's just RF my Air 4 because the. Oops, that was the wrong one. Okay. Let me just do this, Air 4. So what I want to do now is I want to do an ng new for the Angular CLI, because if you're going to get started with an Angular 2 project, you definitely want to use the CLI. So I'm going to call this ng new Air 4, and now this installing process takes a bit, so if you want to get a coffee, a sandwich, or something like that, now's a pretty good time to do so. Because this installing packages for tooling via npm is not the quickest process known to man.
Quick question, David. I know right now they don't support like plugins and that type of thing for the Angular CLI, but I know you guys, in particular with Firebase and especially with the static hosting, there's a lot of things that you could do kind of adding on to the CLI. Do you guys have plans for that in the future?
Yeah, back in the day, by back in the day I mean like January, I wrote a plugin for the Angular CLI. Oh, I gotta hit chat open, that's embarrassing. But I wrote a plugin for the Angular CLI, and for Firebase and it did essentially the deploying of Firebase, your app to Firebase hosting, and it actually ended up being super superfluous because the Firebase CLI itself still works really great. You just need to cd into the dist folder in your Angular CLI project and then deploy from within there, and it works. So you can do add-ons. Like the Angular CLI is based off the Ember CLI, which has the add-on system. So there are ways to do that through the add-on system. But
I think some of that is changing. I'm not sure if.
Oh, yeah, it's true. This landscape's always changing. But I find that most of the things that you need to do, you can actually just do straight from the terminal. So, like, when we can cd into Air 4, and I don't think LSL. I don't have a dist folder yet, but if there was a dist folder here, I would just cd into dist, and then after I did that, I could type, Firebase init, or actually from there just be like a Firebase deploy, and after I've initialized it, that would deploy everything out. So it's not super critical that there is an add-on for those type of things. Any plugin that we'd want probably would have to do around generating scaffolding, like how you can generate scaffolding for components and stuff like that. But now I have this open. Let's do a code dot. Oh, let me close out of that. And let me go into first things first I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this terminal right in here. So Command Shift P, there's a terminal inside of Visual Studio Code, which is super awesome. And then I'm going to do another npm install Firebase and AngularFire 2 save. So this is another. This is the beauty of being a web developer, is that you get to watch great npm loading screens all the time. It's like why I got into this business.
You know, what's funny is actually if you turn off that silly loading progress thing, it actually runs 30% faster.
That is a life hack right there, if I've ever.
Yeah. I'll include on the show notes the command so that you can turn that off.
All right. So I've installed it via. So I've installed everything. Clear this out. And the first thing you have to do is you need to, if you're adding any type of third party or anything outside of Angular world, you have to open up this Angular CLI build file, and you need to specify what you need. And in this case, I do this a lot, so I have it at a little snippet. So you include AngularFire 2, everything that's JavaScript underneath that, and the same for Firebase, everything JavaScript underneath it. And we know that exists because it's a node module. So AngularFire 2 and Firebase right here. So they map up pretty well. Now,
David, this is going to handle getting your this package from the node modules into your dist directory, right?
Correct. So if I do an ng build at this point, it's going to generate my dist folder, and then inside vendor, that's where you can see AngularFire 2 and Firebase. And that's everything that's inside here is what goes inside vendor. And that is what is specified in index.html. So now I've specified that, which makes me happy. But now I have to go into the scary part of the world, and that is when you deal with system.js. So where are you, system.config.ts? So now we'll open up this file, and it's like crazy amounts of comments. You got stuff down here that you shouldn't touch. This file always seems kind of scary to me, but it's actually not too bad. So what we have to do right now is we have to map these dependencies we have, like Firebase and AngularFire 2, and we have to let system know they exist. So the previous step we did is we were just we're letting the CLI know that these are files we want included in our build. And right now we want system to know they exist, because system.js is essentially, we don't have module loading in the browser today, so system is the shim for that. And to specify our files, we just let system know where they live. So Firebase lives in vendor/Firebase/Firebase.js, and then with AngularFire 2, it's a bit different. So it is vendor/AngularFire 2, but we're not going to specify a specific file like we're doing with Firebase, because it's actually a package. So with Firebase, everything we need is contained within this one file. So we can point system at this Firebase.js file and just say, have a good time with this file. With AngularFire 2, it's more than just one file. We actually have an entire package, because we wrote it in TypeScript. We wrote it with the entire module system in mind. So to let that be loaded properly, we need to specify it as a package. So I can do that down here and say AngularFire 2, and you have to specify two things. You have to specify the default extension, in this case it's JavaScript, and then also the main file, which in our case is called AngularFire2.js. Now, some people ask me sometimes why you have to specify the default extension, and the answer to that is I have no idea. So you can maybe that's why I was hoping Patrick was on. This was one of my Patrick joke moments, but he's not on, so maybe next time. So now that this is specified, what I need to do is I need to go into my ts config. And tsconfig essentially is, hey, I'm using TypeScript, and here are all these options that I want for TypeScript. Like, where's my output directory? Do I want source maps? What's my target build? ES5, ES3, ES6. You can specify all these things. And then what we also can do is we can specify which files we want compiled or included in our build. And with Angular, we know that your entry point is your main TS file, where you do all your bootstrapping and everything. And so if you specify your main TS, it will know to compile everything that is a dependent of main TS. But we also want to include these typings. And so typings give us, let's see, typings in this case references typing/browser, so it gives us all these browser typings and all this stuff we need to know to get nice TypeScript support. And we need to do the same for the Firebase typings. We need to use our own. And so we don't actually use typings. We just ship ours with the node module. So we can do I have the little shortcut right here. So node modules, AngularFire 2, Firebase 3.dts, and now we have Firebase typings. And so at this point, we should be pretty good. So I want to actually start writing real code. And to do that, I'm going to go into my main TS. And then this is where I'm going to set up AngularFire to be used down the component tree. So I can inject the AngularFire service, I can start creating observables through Firebase, and it really all starts right here. And so I'm going to import from AngularFire 2. And then from inside here, I'm going to grab this. How did I spell that? AngularFire 2. Okay, great. I'm going to import default Firebase, and I'm not getting my nice little Visual Studio Code support, so it always makes me nervous when that doesn't happen. And then my Firebase providers. And so down in my Bootstrap phase, this is where we can make things available down the component tree. So I want to have all the Firebase providers available because that's all the services we need. And then lastly, I'm going to use this default Firebase object. And I'm mad that TypeScript is just not totally working. I'm actually going to kill this, and I'm going to start this up again because this happens all the time. All right. There we go. I wanted it to yell at me. So it's yelling at me right now because I need to pass in a configuration. And so I'm going to do a little snippet for that. And so this configuration is what you need from Firebase. And this might seem like a lot of information, but it's actually just copy and paste information. If we go to the Firebase dashboard and you click this web setup, it's essentially all of this information right here. And you just copy and paste it into this.
I got sorry.
Good.
I got a question on this actually. So you have the API key here, and I noticed this when I was. You mute while I'm talking. I'm getting some feedback.
Okay, yeah, let me do that. I don't know. Where is your? There it is.
Okay. So when I was transitioning from the previous version of Firebase to Firebase 3.0, I noticed that the API key is on the client side, whereas I think before you can make you like Firebase 2 and before you can make it like essentially public, anonymous users can access. So there wasn't really an API key, and like, is there any like basically security related issues with exposing your API key on the client side?
Nope. It's actually just a key to help out the client when he gets to the back end to be able to locate essentially like the centerpiece identifier for all of your different services for Firebase, like your project identifier, which is unimportant from a security perspective. It's just like your database URL. Except this is really just sort of a convenience factor for the back end, and it's totally fine to include on the client side, and there's nothing you have to do to secure it either.
Well, okay, but you would assume that basically the use of this should be public, right? Because anybody could grab that. Okay.
Yeah, no, this is totally fine being public. There's no secure information that is known from this. It's just like I said, it's just a convenience for the backend to have it.
Right. If you want to, like, I think we connect from our API, like on the server side, to do some of the data updates and maintenance, and for that you create like a service account.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. You need a service account if you're on the server side for the Java or Node SDKs to do anything of significance.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Keep going.
No, good point.
I have a question too. Is this pointing to the new Firebase portal now with AngularFire 2?
Correct. Yes. This
Okay.
is all the new stuff.
Okay, so I know previously when I was playing with it a few weeks ago, it tripped me up a bit. I had to create my Firebase project in the old portal for AngularFire 2 to connect to it, but now everything's up front, right?
Yeah, no, everything oh yeah, it's because we were still, a few weeks ago, we were still upgrading to the new SDK. So yeah, you were doing everything. However, you could have used the you could have used the new site for the database, but not for the authentication. So
Okay.
sort of like this weird no man's land, and that's why we needed to get it upgraded for many. Oh, cool, yeah. So this is all this information that you get. And then once you have that, you just specify it in your default Firebase, and then we're pretty much ready to go. And so I will go to my app component, and these errors are just Visual Studio Code's just tripping. It thinks, it's saying, hey, just letting you know, decorators, that's not an official feature. And you're like, I know, TypeScript's cool, don't worry about it. And so at this point, what we want to do is you want to import from AngularFire 2 again. AngularFire 2. And at this point, we want to just import this AngularFire service. And what we do inside here is we'll take the constructor, and we're going to inject it in here. And from this point, we can use all the services on AngularFire. So I could call af.database, which will give me access to this list or object, which will create a list observable or an object observable. And I can point out to a spot in my database, which I'll show you in just a second. And since it's observable, I'm just going to subscribe and log the results to the console. And now let's do an ng build and an ng serve. Oh, and it doesn't like something. I know exactly what it doesn't like. It's saying, hey, you deleted title, because I made this huge mistake by not deleting the test immediately. It's always a recommendation of mine. It's just delete tests. They never ever seem to really help. That's just
from the you're talking about from the auto-generated stuff from the CLI. You delete them.
No, just any test, any unit test at all. If you see anything with like .test or .spec, you can just delete it. You're just saving everybody time. That's just what they believe on the Angular.
I at least like to just comment it out. At least the files exist there, and I pretend like they exist.
No, just out of sight, out of mind. Just delete it. That's what Jeff Crossy spends hours writing these tests, and I'm like, what is he doing? I just delete them, and
Nice.
I haven't told him yet. He just knows all the tests pass. All right. So now let's go back to the database. And so we have these two objects. And so we have this one with a dollar key and a name, and then this one right here with a dollar key and a name again. So I thought Patrick's going to be on, but Patrick's not going to be on. So I'm going to make a change. And so we have Jeff and Jeff. And then we get an update. Oh, man, this Hangout sharing my screen thing is tripping me up. Okay, so, and then now we have item 1 of Jeff and item 2 of Jeff. And what's cool about that is we make the change, it updates everything, and this dollar key is actually a convenience the library shows to print out the key value. And so when we created the list of items, and that's because we have this node of items, and that's because the real-time database is a NoSQL JSON database, which is a super fancy way of saying that this is a database that's just one big JSON object that you manage. And so items is just a JSON key that has 2 child keys, so 1 and 2, that have child keys of name. And so it's just, if you're used to JSON, then you'll feel right at home with the real-time database.
Is it Mongo under the scenes, or do you guys use something else custom?
It's, from what I currently know, a sort of like a custom use of Mongo, from a we don't use Mongo just outright.
Gotcha.
It's like a very custom use of it. All right, so now that's one way of doing things. So you can do things through a list, but we also can do things through just a single object. And so we wouldn't want to get we could do it this way, but if we just want to get one back, we could just say items of /1, and let's be idiomatic and change that to item. And then now when I refresh, we just get the first item. So item 1 is Jeff, key and everything. And then if we update it, and if Patrick was here instead of Patrick, it updates again. So this is great, but I probably want this in a template rather than in just the console. And there's a pretty awesome and easy way to do that. So I'm going to want to use a custom object here, which is a Firebase object observable, which we were going to use for our properties. So we'll say item, and it's Firebase observable. We'll specify that it's a type of any, and then now say this dot item equals items of 1, and I don't need to actually subscribe anymore. So inside of this component.html, let's go and pipe out. Let's do a pre, and I could say that we have item, and let's pipe out to async, and then pipe out to JSON. And this right here says, all right, let's do the double squigglies. We're all familiar with these from Angular 1. So let's template out the item. And this item is actually an asynchronous value since it's an observable. And this observable is essentially a collection that arrives over time. So as this object, every time a property is updated or added, changed, removed, that gets added to this collection. Because an object is essentially, it's a hash map, so it's a collection of key values. And as they change, we're going to subscribe to these changes. And piping to async just says, let's subscribe, and it's a nice way of doing it from within the template. And so since we are subscribing with async, we then pipe out to JSON. And this is just a little formatter like you're used to in Angular 1. So now we're loading, and then you can see right here we have our first key. We have name, Patrick, and key of 1, and the same thing would work again. Go back to Jeff, and it changes in real time. So that is how you do a setup and you work with observables and lists in AngularFire 2.
Huzzah. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the second item, doing a deep dive into observables.
All right. So let's go. Yeah, let's do this. All right, so let's go back into the app component. And I want to switch back to using lists. So let me list of items. And for a list, I'm going to use a Firebase list observable. And so we'll say property of items. And we don't want to subscribe right now. And I could say this dot items, AF.database, a list of items. And we go into the template and create a UL and an LI and do an ng4. And what I want to do at this point is I want to just iterate through all of the items. So I can say let item of items, and since we know this is asynchronous, I'm going to pipe to async. And I want to do something similar, something simple, which is item.name, and template that. Now let's go to the thing, and we see we both have Jeff and Jeff, and we say Jeff 1, 2. And that updates there in real time because it's magic. And at this point, though, let's say we wanted to do something a bit more powerful, like we wanted to limit back the type of things we were getting. Well, what's kind of great about this is we can actually say, all right, let's filter out what we're going to do here, and let's say where item Why is it not? Oh, filter does not exist because I need to import. Oh, let's see here. RxJS/operator/filter. I can't remember this now off the top of my head. Because you have to, essentially what you have to do is all these operators do not come for free when you're using observables. You actually have to import them, and you import them straight, the function straight on, and then it becomes patched onto the observable.
Now that is specifically because so we can have the smallest package size when we're doing our deployment to production, right?
Correct, yeah, because there are dozens of operators in RxJS, and to assume that you want all of them is likely incorrect because not everyone needs to switch map or zip merge or whatever doodad is the latest, hottest new operator to use. So to include them all would, be a pretty big burden to the user. So right now, I'm trying to remember if there's Matt Kawasaki, if he's watching right now, is probably screaming at me and being like, it's in this folder.
Is it add operator?
Thank you. Yes, add operator. Okay, great. I think now it's yelling at me because I'm not doing anything great with it anymore. See, that's why I'm glad you're here, Justin.
Do what I can.
Yeah. Let's see here. All right, so now if I say, okay, and let's do this on one line. So let's say we're item.name is equal to Jeff. And what is it? Oh, because, so this is a nice little TypeScript thing we're doing. So we're saying we want of any, and this is kind of saying, well, any doesn't have a thing of name. So I could go and I could create a model and I could assign it to that. But I'm lazy and I want to talk about typecasting. So what I actually can do is I can say like TypeScript, listen, I know what I'm doing. And this needs to go right in here. And then at this point, let's see here, can I invoke expression changes lexical? How am I doing this? I always forget.
Does any go before?
Yes, I think so. There we go. Thank you. Yeah. And so at this point now, what I'm doing is I'm saying, all right, I'm casting and saying like, listen, I know what I'm doing, TypeScript, which is usually not the case. And I say, I know what I'm doing. This has a property of name, and then I can set that, to, I want to make sure compare this name. So I only want to filter back these people who are Jeff. And let's format this over here. And so now I'm going to get yelled at because we're saying, let's see, observable. Oh, yes, because it's saying, hey, we don't recognize this, type of observable. And so I could do another cast, or another way you could really do this is you could say import observable from RxJS. And then rather than use a Firebase list observable, you can just use a regular observable. And it works just the same. You do miss out on some of the functions that come with it, but we don't need that for now. So we're just going to go with this. So now when I save and do a refresh, and why it didn't refresh for me? Oh, it's because we don't have any Jeffs. We have Jeff 1 and Jeff 2. So if we say Jeff and go back, why didn't that one go through? I think I might have another error in here. This should return items. Here. Let's figure out what's going on. So another great operator is the do operator. So I'm going to include that in here. And so what the do is a really nice way to figure out like what's going on and to debug. And so at this point, what I can do is I can actually log through this stream. So as this stream gets items, I can log it, and it's sort of do is a place where you do all your side effects, which if you talk to anyone who's big into observables, they don't want you to have any side effects. So I always say like the do operator is more like the don't operator, because whenever you use do, you tend to do pretty ugly things in it. But do is a great place when you're trying to figure out why this isn't working. So if I go into here, I'm not getting anything logged to my console, which means that we're actually never getting to this point. So I can even bring it above a line into here, and let's see what's going on right here. Aha, so now we get these two back. And so we have key name of Jeff. And so what's going on here is there's something wrong on this comparison. And this is likely because, like what I was saying, is I'm telling TypeScript I know what I'm doing. And TypeScript's like, seriously, you don't know what you're doing. So let's see what's going on here when I say const obj. And let's do, actually, I still want to return this. So I'm going to return this, but I'm going to console.log the item just to make sure I do know what I'm doing. And I'm going to get rid of this do because that'll just make the logs confusing. All right. Oh, I know why. It's because I'm treating this like it's a object, but it's not an object. What we're actually doing is we're getting back a list, which is an array. So this is actually a list of items. So like I said earlier, where you don't know what you're doing, I didn't know what I was doing, and I told TypeScript, like, listen, I know what's going on. And it's like, seriously, you don't. So rather than just returning from here, I need to actually do items. So rather than item, I want this to be items. And I'm going to say items.filter. And then now I'll have an item. I can say item.name is equal to Jeff. And I'm going to return from here. And this isn't going to like it because, let's see here. Let's see.
Well, you're returning an array of array, right?
Right. Oh, so I want to return here. Filter items, get the array, and then I'll return from within here, items.filter, return, or item name is Jeff. This should be, any is not assignable to Boolean. This should be one item. Let's see what's going on in here. Let's make sure I'm doing my filter correctly. So I can do within here, I wonder if it'll let me just console.log item. Let's see here. My console, I want to let me do that. This was not something I practiced at all. This is something I'm winging. So if it feels like it, it's because you're right.
No worries.
All right, so item. So I should be able to filter an item. And then I can even just say return true, and that should be happy with that. But why is that? Is that return type Boolean? Oh, it's because I think I'm doing a map. That's what I was actually trying to do. So what I want to do now, so what I was thinking about doing was doing a map, which if you do a map, and then do map, and then do this part, then it will let you do that. But no, I can't remember what I wanted to do. So if I wanted to pluck these out, how would I handle this? Nothing like live coding in front of people watching you. All right, so I'm going to filter, and then I'm going to get these items back, and then from this actual array, I want to just get back the items. So what I can do is I can return. So let's get the reduced item. So filtered is items.filter, item.name is Jeff. And then, so that's great because this is my filtered array set. You know what? Maybe I just want to map and then filter.
Can you get in the filter function the index as well? Items and then the index, and then check that?
You can, but then I have to rely on the index, and that's just like takes some knowledge of the actual data. And so I would have to be like, oh, I know that one is this, but this actually will do the same exact thing as I want. And that's because I'm getting my observable operators confused with my actual array operators, which is one of the things that makes observables great because they act like arrays, but confusing because they're not really arrays. So at this point, now I have Jeff. But if I took Jeff out, Jeff 1, Jeff was gone, but if I go and add this back, now I get Jeff back. Okay, so that's what I was trying to do, and you got to see a really messy debug session through it. So that is how you should do observables. I was going to leave that on a question mark.
Hey, I have one question. So and maybe this is a whole other show or something like that, but So a lot of people are interested in Redux and NGRX. So how do you see where would the point Firebase hook into? Like, let's say NGRX. Where would you hook up Firebase basically in that type of setup?
So AngularFire 2 doesn't have any, to use this wonderful word synergy with NGRX right now. Like, it's sort of two different types of things. So like NGRX, Redux is a really great way of managing state. And I'm not the biggest Redux expert because I seldomly do not have the problems that people have that they try to solve with Redux, because Firebase, the real-time database part, is a great way. It's a state synchronization, across multiple devices. And so when I'm using Firebase, all of my state comes from the synchronization events from the real-time database. So I'm always keeping my data in sync from that. So I tend to not have to do some of the things that Redux has need for, but it doesn't mean that they can't fit really well together. And Rob Wormald and I, sometimes talk about creating a Firebase adapter for the ngRx store, and so the ngRx store would be synchronized with Firebase data or real-time database data, and then you could just use ngRx store methods as if it were anything else. And so that's something we've kicked around that idea for a while, but we've been waiting to get AngularFire 2 ready, and then I think we're gonna look to see what it would take to do that.
I mean, you might be thinking of things in terms of like when you're managing all your data through Firebase, but I think, at least from what I've seen, the more common scenario that people have is that some of their data is managed through Firebase and some through their other data store. And in those cases, if you have bought into something like NGRX and you have all your state in these stores, it is kind of nice to think that you can essentially, like you mentioned, build this adapter where it like pulls or pushes rather. Data into the store from Firebase as it's updated, and then it can go through the same filtering mechanisms that you have for everything else.
Yeah, no, totally, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing it, because AngularFire is, our very like a prescriptive way of doing. It's just like a really easy way of getting started with Firebase and Angular. Like if you know observables and you know JSON, then using AngularFire is going to be really easy to do. And this is like, you don't have to set up anything with NGRX or Redux. It's like really quick out of the box Firebase use. With the NGRX would be a totally different like use case, like what you're saying, and that's something that we would have to like really think through and make sure that it's like it seamlessly fits into that whole world. But Rob's definitely been talking about it and has some interest in doing that.
Cool. All right, that's it for observables. Now let's move on to the last one for routing. I'm really interested to see what you have here.
Me too. All right. So with router, what we're going to do is we're going to just kill all the code we have right now because we don't need it. We don't need any of this. So what we want to do, it's probably going to yell at me because I'm using, let's see here, can I find name AngularFire? And I'm trying to inject AngularFire. Yes, of course. All right. Let's delete this stuff. So, for the new router, there's one thing that I really, really, really like about with the router, and that's the entire router is decoupled from components. So if you use the previous routers and the component router, you could essentially use this annotation on top of components to specify routing, which was kind of cool to be able to load components that way. But I found it a little confusing when you had like one component, then you had like a sub component that also had a router, and you're kind of like, wait, which route config do I need to modify now? And it kind of got kind of crazy. And so now with the router, you can do it all just as a JSON object. And so what we're going to demonstrate is just a really simple, list, master detail. Like we have a list of items, and if we click a link, we're then going to go into the detail. And I'm going to generate these components using the Angular CLI. So ngg component, let's make that a little bigger, ngg component, and I want a list component. And this will go and do that. And then ngg component detail. All right, so minus minus back, make it a little smaller now. And now we have list and detail. And, you know, because who are we kidding, we need to delete the test. That's what I do. And at this point now, what I want to do is I want to be able to map routes to these components. So this list component and this detail component. And you can really do this kind of wherever you want, but you're going to have to provide it in Bootstrap. So I like to keep it as the same level as Bootstrap. So I'm going to create a routes.ts file. And what we need to do is we need to import our components. So we're going to import from let's see here, .app/list, and we will have a list component. And then we're going to import from ./app/detail, and that will be our detail component. And at this point, now we can start actually creating our routes. And if we want to use any types, we can actually do that by importing from @angular/router, and we can import the route object. And all we can do with this, we could say our, our app routes, and it is a type of, it's an array of routes. And at this point, that is an object. And what we can say for here is our first route is this route object. It has a path, and we'll leave this path blank because that's our home path. And the component is the list component. And we can do the same, say path, and we'll say the item/$ID, which will be the parameter. We can say component, and this is the detail component. And really, the last thing you need to do is just export this array, and this is it. This is essentially how you specify your routes in Angular 2. And what I really like about this is, it's actually pretty familiar to doing, this old friend, or to some people not so old. And, when it's this one, I can say, oh, I have a template URL of, item.html, and, my controller of, my list controller. And this is a really, really nice, familiar feel. Like, Jeff, Justin, have you two done anything with the new router?
I'm just now getting into it, so but I've done a lot with the older router, so yeah, I like this change.
Yeah,
I'm just starting to get into it as well.
Okay, yeah, so this is really nice that this object right here, it's direct, analogy to, Angular 1, which is one of the things I really like. So if you're coming on board to Angular 2 right now and you're like, okay, there's a new router, there's something I'm really going to need to learn, it's actually really, really familiar. So we have routes. We have our routes set up, and so now what we want to do is we want to let the application know about our routes. And anytime you need to do that, you just let the application know about something. It usually goes in your main TS where you're doing any bootstrapping. And so we're going to import from the Angular router, and we're going to import the provide router service function factory object service provider, whatever where you plan on calling that. And then we also are going to import from the ./routes, and we're going to import our app routes. And at this point in the provider, just like kind of how we do with default Firebase, we can say provide router with our app routes. And that's it. This is how we do our config, and we let our application know about it. So this is great. And what we want to do now is open up our app, and then we want to go to our main app component.html. And what we want in here is a router outlet. And so we'll use this router outlet, And this should set us up and, for loading up what will be our initial list component. But what we do want to do as well is, since we have included this component right here, this router outlet, we need to make sure that the component itself, the app component, knows of its existence. And to do that, we need to import from Angular/router and do the router directives, because that element is also a directive, and we provide this into the directives array. So that's great. Let's do an ng build and an ng serve and hope nothing explodes. We built without exploding and we served without exploding. Okay, great. So now I refresh and nothing should load. Great, yeah. So it's going to give us a 404. Oh wait, no, but it gives us a 404 for routes, which is not what I want. But this is at least an understandable error. So let's figure out why that is. So it doesn't like this right here where I'm saying import app routes from routes. And I'm trying to figure out why. I'm wondering, I figured this out this morning. Let's go to our dist folder before we do anything crazy. And yes, we aren't actually putting anything inside. We have our, I know routes.js comes in right here and has our, this is what gets required, so that makes sense. So that should work. So why doesn't it like routes? And this should be totally fine. So import app routes from /routes. Our TypeScript liked it. Promise on ready to change. That's as routes. Zone route promise on then. Yes, of course. Okay. We're not really completely totally sure why this is, but I wonder if this is because we're not actually doing anything with our routes yet. So I'm going to move on like we know, because we have list work, so that should load as well. And this isn't doing anything too crazy. All right, so I do not know why it's not liking import app routes from routes. So who wants to do some interactive debugging with me?
Yeah, show me the error again.
It's just a 404 for routes. So we have localhost 4200/routes 404, and I'm pretty sure that's our routes folder.
System.js thing?
That's exactly what I was thinking, actually, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to mess with that. So when you can't beat them, you join them. And so you can't beat it, so what I can do is I can say, oh, you know what? Got this, whoa, look at that. And nothing changes. Now when I save, shouldn't be doing. All right. So I was definitely thinking it had to be a system.js config, because this morning when I set up my routes TS, I actually set it up inside the app. So I'm pretty sure there's a system config I needed to do within here where I would set up the main inside here, but I haven't done that before, so I do not want to start doing that live. So we're just going to provide it into here for now. So this is our route, and we see that we load our list route. So let's create our list. So what we can do is we'll create a UL, an LI, and we'll do an ng4 let item of items. Type that to async, because we're going to use a Firebase list for that. And then inside here, what we can do is we can use a router link, and I'm going to put that in an A tag. And so router link is this directive that says, where do I want to link out to? In our case, we want to go to the, what did we call it? We called this the item route. So we want to go to item. And this second part of the array is what is the ID, so what route parameter. So in this case, we want to use item.$key, because that is the ID that AngularFire gives back to us. And now inside here, just close out this A tag, which is appearing to be a challenge, and do item.name. So I'll get the person's name back. That saves, and we should, we get router, it's because I didn't do something very, very important, and I did not include the directives. So I can say, import the router directives, whenever you use a directive, this is a nice lesson to learn if you're doing Angular 2, is whenever you use a directive that's not one of these out-of-the-box given to you for free ng ones, so like in this case router link, if you didn't make this yourself, and even if you made it yourself, but anything that you're not using that's ng, and you start using this that's not basic HTML, if you're not including it inside this directives array, it's going to blow up at you. So this is going to happen a lot when you're working with the router, especially when you're working with Angular Material 2 that uses tons of directives. And so you have to really make sure that you're including it where it's needed so Angular knows how to load that directive.
Hey, what's your guys' opinion on putting that up in the Bootstrap versus bringing it in each time for the router directive specifically?
For this demo, I feel like I really should have included it in the Bootstrap because then it had just been like YOLO. And I think that I've specified it twice already, especially 2 components down. So unless you're doing something I would say more complicated with the router, I would say it's probably best to throw it into the Bootstrap.
Yeah, my rule is usually once I use it more than one place, I push it up to the Bootstrap level.
Yeah, and I think that as long as you're not doing some, like you could be writing your own custom router code or something like that that uses directives, and when you do that, then maybe you want to be specific about which ones you're providing, and that's only if you're going to deal with like a collision of some sort, which I don't know why you would write a collision, but that's sort of the concept behind this, is that by providing this as a directive, you can control. Like if I wanted for some reason to make my own router link component, I could do that, and then I could just import my own router directives and then throw it into here. And that way, Angular would know to boot it up from that one, and which was not possible in Angular 1 because we had to globally register all of our directives. All right, so now I have that. So what I need to do is just do some simple import AngularFire. I'm going to import AngularFire and AngularFire list observable. So I'm going to do a private AF. And Justin, you know something about Angular style, right? Angular 2 and style?
A little bit.
What is your opinion on using private and then doing the underscore versus not the underscore?
So we decided to ride with the underscore. Just one of the things that we kind of fall into is looking at, okay, what's a common pattern that a lot of people use or tooling uses, and not fight with that, so that our team will, when they look online, for example, code, they'll have similar type of patterns that they come across, sort of thing. So we ended up rolling with the underscore for the private.
Okay, so I agree with that in nature, but it feels so wrong to be like, oh, I'm going to do private and then do underscore, because then it almost feels like it's public because it's a double negative. But then at the end of the day, the joke's on you, because this private means nothing.
Means nothing, right? Right.
So I guess if you want to look at compiled output, you would want the underscore.
Yeah, usually, even though that what you just said makes sense, David, and Justin as well, but I don't know, I just visually have never gotten used to the underscore thing, so I just aesthetically, I guess, never bought in.
Even my own Twitter handle is underscore David East, and it kills me just looking at that underscore. The closest thing I could get to whoever I was.
Did you put in an offer for whoever has David East?
I think they tweeted out once in 2009, and it was like they tweeted out being like, just chillin', something like that. I was like, good for you. Glad you're just chillin'.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hate that.
Onto more important things. Firebase list observable, and I'm going to do this if any. And then this items is af.database.list of my items, and that will set up the synchronizing. And so when we go into here, we have Jeff1 and Jeff, which I'm going to change to Justin, and just Jeff, because there's no two Jeffs here. So when I click this, it then loads us to detail. And right now it just says detail works, which is good to know that detail works, but I want it to actually load up information about the person. And so to do that, I'm going to go down into this HTML, and then I'm going to change this to say pre. I'm just going to spit out like we did earlier with item type async type JSON. That will be our template. And inside of here, in our detail component, this is where we're going to do, what is it, AF. We're going to import everything as an object, so object observable. And say item, Firebase, object observable. And inside here, AF, AngularFire. I guess it doesn't matter if it's public or private because I'm not using it outside of the constructor. And I can say this dot item is af.database.object, and I would say item, but I need to know what the ID is. So how do I know the ID? So that means I can't actually do it in the constructor, which means I do need to provide a private. And Justin, will it kill you if I don't use the underscore?
Not at all. You do your thing.
Because if you,
I'll support you.
Now I feel like using it because you were so nice about it. If you weren't so nice, you're like, oh, it's going to kill me. I was going to be like, all right, let's go. All right, so what we want to do now is we're injecting AngularFire, but we also need to be able to get our route parameter. And to do that, we're going to import from the Angular/router. And somewhere in England, Pete Bacon-Darwin is yelling at me, he's like, it's router! And I'm like, sorry, Pete. All right, and what we're going to import is the activated route. And from within here, we're going to do a private route, underscore route for you, Justin. Activated route. And just as a question, Justin, what is your style on when you have to inject more than one thing in the detail component? Do I space it out like this? Do I put it on one line? Like, does this go on? Does the bracket go right here? Does it go right there?
Well, I'm glad you asked because we run into that and we're trying to decide on that. So one of the things we thought about was as soon as you get kind of more, we end up putting the first parameter on a new line so that they all kind of line up as a couple spaces in. And then, so like right after your constructor, parentheses, yeah, there, and then line that guy over there. And then we end up, but the side effect of that is we end up putting a extra space after the squiggly bracket so that you're inside that function doesn't line up, yeah.
So wait, so does it go on this line or the next line?
Okay, so no, the way you had it.
One?
Yeah, and okay. Then one more, there you go. That's kind of what we decided to go with. It kind of feels okay.
It's not too bad. You know, I've seen similar things in the Java landscape. Okay, so now with the activated route, what we can do is this dot route, and I can say params and get the ID. And so, but actually I need to do this inside of ng on init, my bad. So this is the part where I'm like, oh, wait, can't remember. So I get the ID, and I'm going to do a console.log because I feel like I'm doing something wrong here. And so when you think you're doing something wrong, you always console.log. And so yes, it is undefined. And that's because I believe this is an asynchronous thing. So this dot route dot, oh man, I can't remember what the thing is. Oh, it's right, because it's an observable. That's what it is. So what I need to do is need to subscribe, and this will return to me params. So if you think something is observable in Angular 2, it probably is. And now what I can do is I can get this params, and I can say, actually not subscribe, I can say map, and I can return params of ID. So this, then if I say subscribe, and what is your style in observable chaining? Is there a style for observable chaining?
That's kind of what I roll with right there, what you're doing.
Right here?
Yeah, it kind of feels good.
Okay. So it's also like, it's like the, logo or the slogan of the Angular 2 style, guide is it like, here's some things that you should do, but at the end of the day, do what makes you feel good.
Yeah, they put that up there. I think their approach is nice. They are pretty clear about the fact of like, look, this is what we recommend, but hey, balls in your court sort of thing. It's not like this is what you have to do.
Okay. So what's cool about this is now what I'm doing is I'm mapping through all the parameters, and I just want to get back the ID parameter, which if you recall in our main TS, we use the :id. So because of that, inside of here, we can just pass through this ID, and then if I'm returning from that, that's just going to be available in subscribe, and then I can say this dot AF, actually I want to say this dot item is this dot underscore AF dot database dot object, and I'll say items, and using the string interpolation of ID. All right, now I'll save, and when we go back, boom, that works. The formatting's a little off, but still, when I go to each one, we've now set up just super basic master detail for routing with AngularFire 2, and everything, as you see, is an observable. So that is how you do basic routing with AngularFire 2 and just Angular 2 in general. And if you are a person who knows a lot about System.js or why I screwed up this part, I'm very interested to know, so hit me up.
David, that was an amazing live coding show. I mean, people always run into issues, so like I love that you kept your cool and kind of just went through it. So that was awesome.
Very cool.
I very much only practiced the setup, so the rest of it, I was like, yeah, let's have fun. Let's see how this goes.
All right, we're at the top of the show, so let's dive right into the picks. And Justin, why don't you start off?
Yeah, so my pick is a web-based game called Kahoot, Kahoot. I went to my daughter's open house at her school earlier this year, and in her English class, we were playing that. It's basically a server-client game that's kind of like a trivia type of game, and it's actually built with Angular, so pretty neat. And I think it would be a pretty good fit, too, with Firebase. I don't know if they're using that or not, but it's got this real-time sort of deal going back and forth, so it's pretty cool.
You have their people reach out to my people.
Cool. Make sure you put the link in the Slack channel.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right, David, what about for you?
Now, does it have to be programming related?
No, not at all.
Okay, so if anyone knows anything about me, is that I've been getting back into skateboarding lately, and it's
30
fun.
days in a row on doing a kickflip?
No, definitely not 30 days in a row. That's for sure. 30 days of just actually being out there and practicing. Some days are better than others. But so yeah, I've been practicing on my skateboard every single day for 30 days, which is kind of cool when you make yourself do something consistently. But what I've used to help myself is this YouTube channel called Braille Skateboarding, which is like, Braille is in like, read Braille, and they do amazing skateboard tutorials of like, from the easiest things of how to ollie, which I learned how to ollie the first day watching it. It was super easy, and then from super complicated things to like how to 360 flip. And if you follow them, they kind of take you up this great channel or great progression path. And they also do lots of hilarious videos where they attack skateboard trucks onto anything and skate it. So they've done an iPad, an iPhone 6 Plus, a Mac Pro, 2x4. It's pretty entertaining. So Braille Skateboarding, I highly recommend you check it out.
That's awesome, man. I'm definitely going to check that out. For my picks, I really just have one pick. Minko Gedchev, who's a frequent visitor to the show, wrote an awesome blog post on building an Angular 2 application for production, basically going through how to package your app and use a lot of the modern packaging techniques for tree shaking and everything like that. You can basically get your final package size down to really, really small, especially, for sure, like a Hello World, but even like a significant app. fraction of the size of if you were doing it in Angular 1 or some of the other frameworks you may have worked on. So definitely check that out. I'll include the link in the show notes. And the last thing I was going to mention is that for the next 2 shows, we do have a little bit of a break here for the 4th of July. I hope everybody has a safe one. But we're going to come back on the 7th, Thursday the 7th, with Patrick and I totally winging a tutorial on some universal tricks and tips. So we can only hope to aspire to do as well then as David did today. And then the next Tuesday, right after that on the 12th, Chris Thielen is coming in to give a tutorial on the new UI router. So we're looking forward to that as well.
Can I be present for the universal setup, and then can I do to you what you did for me?
That would actually be pretty awesome. Yeah, let's do that.
You were really nice, though. I have a hard time being that nice. I usually like to stop every 2 seconds and just nitpick, not because I care, but because it's fun.
That's cool. Yeah, let's plan on doing that.
All right. It's a date.
Definitely. All right, guys. Have a great 4th of July. See everybody next week.
Later,
guys.